of ripeness right from the farm to you, so they're bursting with flavor by the time they reach your doorstep. HelloFresh cuts out stressful meal planning and grocery store trips so that you can enjoy cooking and get your dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. HelloFresh offers more than 25 recipes every week, all designed to
Okay, you're live.
Okay, all right, great. So we can say hello to everybody.
Over 4 out of 5, and we're one of them. HelloFresh customers say HelloFresh helps them lead a healthier lifestyle with delicious, low-calorie, carb-smart, and vegetarian options every week. And most important, HelloFresh provides the yummiest meals ever. Go to HelloFresh.com/Tom12 and use the code Tom12 for 12 free meals plus 4 boxes, including free shipping on your first box. That's HelloFresh.com/THOM12.
All right, so we got your Pearl up. Hey. Let me know if you all can hear me. And Paul, let me know if you can hear me on Facebook.
Morning, noon, and night for a lot of us. Just because we care about our country. We care about our future. We care about our gay brothers and sisters. We care about the woman's
Paul,
right
can
to
you hear me?
Yes, yeah, it sounds good.
Thank you.
Parents, it's been heavy. It's been so heavy that we've been through a lot.
Hey, Samantha. Hey, Vandalay. How you doing, sweetie? You all ready for Lula to win or run? Let me know who you're supporting. Daphne, Deborah. You can hear great. You know, we're going to be talking about what happened in Atlanta. You know, because I must tell you, I did not know that so much of this was tied to people who work what sex workers. I guess that's how they put it. And I'm not making a judgment about anyone. You know, you shouldn't be killing anybody. How about that? Just that's basic. Because you're having a bad time, you decide you're going to kill people. It's crazy. So we're going to be talking about that with some, and you know, a lot of the challenges that we see on overseas with our bases, our military bases, are tied to, particularly in Asia, are tied to a lot of our servicemen, really funding that industry and being violent toward the indigenous women in the Philippines and throughout Asia. So there's a lot to discuss, and you know, and women of color are hypersexualized if you really think about it. You know, the hot Latina, the hot black woman, the sexy Asian woman, all of that.
Both President Biden and Vice President Harris will be in Atlanta.
And it ended, I mean, and then all of this anti-Asian talk is not helping. It is actually hurting. So the president's going to be going down there today with our vice president, who is a member of the Asian community. You know, her mother was an Indian. So we just hope that they will be able to bring some hope and healing to that community, because it is, they're in a lot of pain. They're in a lot of pain. A lot of pain. And that's painful. So Will Jones, Billy Wingo, Nina. Hey, Robert, how you doing? Happy Friday, Barbara Jean. And so I'm going to let you go, Marnie. And
we have Reverend Williams.
Okay, let me get Reverend
Have
Williams.
a good show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. As always, Marnie. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Let me do this. Okay. Hey, Reverend Williams, how are you?
Hi, I'm well. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. You know what I want? If I could, I'd like to speak with you after the show. I have a couple of things I want to run past you.
Americans are homeless.
Sure, you can absolutely call me when it's done.
I will
do
that. I'm going to be doing a couple of other things, but I want to speak with you about a couple of things. And look at your watch, because I want to be wrapped up in your segment by about 19 after. I'm going to come out of my headlines. I'm trying to abbreviate them so I can give you more space. I'm just trying to abbreviate them just in general. So there's that.
Okay.
Because I want to give Dr. Holden 10 minutes. We're going to be talking about what's happened in Atlanta today. So if you want to participate in that, you're more than welcome to. It's,
okay. I have to hop off after my segment to prepare for something this afternoon.
Oh, no worries. I just want, I should have told you sooner, but I wanted to let you know.
No, that's okay.
that because it's a real there. I want to begin to push these issues out.
Yeah, that was a real travesty. Terrible, just horrible.
Well, and it's very much in keeping with our history here. When people say this is not America, I'm
Very much.
like, no, this is very much America. This is
Yeah,
the America that Black
yeah.
people have known, and so now everybody
Boy. Mhm.
gets that America moment if you're not white, and if you are white, if you
That's
are,
right.
Irish people were relegated to the hinterlands, if you will. I mean, they were, and
Mm.
Germans. Everybody's had their turn, but everybody tends to forget
2 minutes away.
Yes,
just
yes,
exactly what
yes.
this that otherizing people and and treating us as if we're less than. It hurts everybody eventually
Right.
and ultimately, right?
That's right.
So,
That's right. Absolutely.
Bab, how you doing?
Mm.
Because it really goes way beyond color, way beyond it, and
Oh,
people need to understand that this is not just we have racialized the otherizing of people in the United States. But let us be very, very clear. This is a human problem.
mm-hmm.
It's a human
Mm-hmm.
problem because you have some,
It is.
some of us who are treacherous, and
Mm-hmm.
who will
Mm-hmm.
betray. I mean, and every group has it. Everybody who thinks that they're safe.
Right.
1 minute.
So it's gotta have to grow up in our politics and understand what's really going on here. So thank you all for being with us
Right.
this morning. Ralph Williams, we're going to be talking about what's happening in Georgia and what's happening to the Asian American community, what's been happening to sex workers, what's been happening to sex
Mm.
workers of color. It's a whole lot. And let's not judge them because guess what? They're working people,
30.
And they have clients who never get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. Please go over to my YouTube page, The Santita Jackson Show. Stanley, lead everybody over there. Makiba,
15.
Ralph, please do that so that we can build up those numbers. All right,
10.
everybody. And like and share this show. We're coming up.
5.
Mm-hmm.
It's holy, holy, holy.
Right.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Friday, March 19th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. This is WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. AM 950 radio, my family to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're going to be having a ball. I just spoke with Chad Larson yesterday. I've got to give you some information about that. It's going to happen in April. It's going to be fantastic. So we can all get dressed up. It'll be virtual, but it's going to be great. It's great to be with you today, everybody. Please call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And I want to hear from my brothers and sisters up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Madison, and Milwaukee. I want to hear from all of you today. Let's talk about Atlanta. What happened in Atlanta? What is happening to the Asian American community? I just saw a headline in the Washington Post. A 75-year-old Asian woman in San Francisco was attacked, and she beat her attacker. I said, "Go ahead, Grandma. I love it. I love it. I love it." And I'm a nonviolent person. That having been said, there's a lot of violence that we have in our country, that we have in our culture, and we need to look at it. We really need to take a real look at it. Stop saying that this is not who we are, because this is who we are. The question is this who we want to be? Is this who we want to remain? And just be very clear. It's ungodly to be violent, to be mean, to be cruel, to be anything other than good, really. Now, I miss the mark all the time. I'm not violent, but I can have some thoughts. But we have to get better, everybody. And not just better, we need to get right. So let's talk about these alliances that now people of color and people of goodwill, white people, brown, yellow, red, all people coming together because watching what's happening to the Asian American community, what's happening to George Floyd, and what's happening to other people other than yourself, who really means that's your brother of yourself. Well, now people are beginning to come together. We're beginning to wake up and grow up in our politics and grow up in the way that we relate to each other. So we're going to talk about that today with two prominent organizers and leaders in the Asian American community and with you. Want to hear what you're thinking about this, what you're thinking about this. Think about your mother, your sister, your friend, your brother, your husband, someone who would go get a massage. I don't, you know, did they need to be killed? And just someone who says that they've got a problem. Do you kill me because you got a problem? No, we got to talk about that, everybody. Today. Today. And then we're going to talk about what's happening in Georgia again with the vote. Because we are in the 2022 cycle. We all celebrated when a couple of months ago, Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff won the seats in Georgia. Well, Reverend Warnock's seat is up in a little more than a year and a half, and fewer people, if these bills in Georgia stand, will be able to vote. So his seat's in danger, as are other seats, because more than 43 states around the country are peeling back the voting laws. And we're going to be talking with Dr. Deborah Holden about the effects of the vaccine. Because, a lot of people are beginning to see the effects all over the world. And so we want to talk about that. And we want to hear from you if you've had the vaccine, if you've been fully vaccinated, how you're reacting, and what you expect to see. And if you haven't, if you plan to, just talk to us. We want to hear from you. So call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. And so as we go to these headlines, let's look at the weather. Chicago, it's going to be sunny, 42 degrees. It is cold and windy out there, everybody. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 53 degrees, warmer than we are, and it's sunny. The Dow closed down 153 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 409 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 58 points. And on to the headlines. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, who is a member of the Asian community, yes, the Black community as well, but her mother was Indian. They will be heading down to Atlanta today to engage in outreach to the Asian American community and to the broader Atlanta and Georgia community, because they need comfort in the light of the killings of 8 persons. 8 persons. There's violence against their community. He has ordered flags flown at half staff after the shooting that killed 6 Atlanta area women of Asian descent. And White House officials, according to this Washington Post report, have been working the phones, reaching out to leaders and advocates in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community and reaffirming their commitment to fighting anti-Asian hatred. In the meantime, Georgia's shootings are going to test the state's new hate crimes laws as the debate rages over the suspect's motives. So we're going to be talking with Attorney C.K. Hoffler about that. What about the hate laws? Do you think this is a hate crime? Talk to me, somebody, 773-763-9278. And boy, there was an emotional hearing about this yesterday. Indeed, GOP Congressman Chip Roy from Texas decided to focus on the right of Republicans to criticize China. He said, we shouldn't be worried about having committee members of Congress policing our rhetoric because some evildoers do engage in some evil activity, as has occurred in Texas. And then he went down the rabbit hole, everybody. And he said there's an old saying in Texas about find all the rope in Texas and get a tall oak tree. Wow. Seemingly celebrating lynchings. And it sparked an immediate and emotional outcry, a tearful response indeed, from U.S. Representative Grace Meng from New York, a Democrat from New York. Wow. Can you believe that? Find all the rope in Texas and get a tall oak tree. Really? More than 4 in 10 health workers have not been vaccinated. Now get these statistics from the Washington Post. While about 2 in 10 healthcare workers said they scheduled a shot or were planning to, 3 in 10 healthcare workers said they were unsure about getting vaccinated or not planning to do so. And as many as 1 in 6 health workers said that if employers required them to get vaccinated, they would leave their jobs, everybody. Advocates are applauding the House of Representatives' passage of bills paving the way to citizenship for dreamers and farm workers, everybody. The House of Representatives yesterday passed a pair of landmark immigration reform bills that would pave the way to citizenship for millions of so-called dreamers, a move that numerous immigrant rights groups have hailed, but others have criticized for excluding many people with criminal histories, as well as over 1 million agricultural workers and their families. Democrats have introduced a bill to let Puerto Ricans determine their own political future. That's right, to decolonize an American colony, everybody. Amid renewed debates over Puerto Rican statehood, given Democratic control of both houses of Congress and the White House, a trio of lawmakers on Thursday reintroduced a bill that would allow residents of the U.S. Island Territory colony to chart their own political path. Nydia Velasquez of New York, AOC of New York, and Bob Menendez of New Jersey, the senator from New Jersey. And of course, Dr. Fauci got into it with Dr. Rand Paul yesterday, Dr. Rand Paul said that isn't mask wearing just theater? There's been a lot of back and forth, everybody, about mask wearing, and we're going to ask Dr. Deborah Holden about that, including the study from the CDC that shows that poverty is a key driver in vaccine inequities. Well, you know what time it is, everybody. It's Friday, and it is time for some good news from the anointed Pastor Tisha Williams of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, New York. Give us some good news today. I need it.
Good morning, Santita. Well, thank you so much for having me this morning. It's always a joy. So I wanted to talk today with spring right around the corner. We've already sprung ahead in our clock. I thought it would be really great to talk today about blooming where you're planted. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 41, it reads 18 to 20, I will open rivers on bare heights and the fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness or the desert a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. I will put in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, and the olive. I will set in the desert the cypress, the plane, and the pine together, so that all may see and know, all may consider and understand that the hand of the Lord has done this. The Holy One of Israel has created it. There are 37 different trees mentioned in the Bible. And if you take a minute to think about it, trees and humans have a lot in common. The human life with its ups and downs can easily be compared to the four seasons of a tree. We both need food for proper nourishment, and we're both susceptible to the storms of life. Why, even in the book of Genesis, God creates trees and man a mere 3 days apart. But in order to understand the trees in this text, the first thing we have to understand is how they got there. You know, I love the phrase grow where you're planted, until one day I saw a tapestry hanging that read bloom where you're planted. This was an aha moment for me, because there's a difference between growing and blooming. To grow means to increase by natural development. Just like any living thing, it's an increase in size. In other words, growth is what's visible on the outside, but to bloom means to flourish and to thrive. And here's what we find. You can't just bloom. You have to bloom where God wants you, bloom where God needs you, and we bloom for God's glory. Look at the trees in this passage. Just like them, we find ourselves often planted in some odd places, don't we? The first thing that's unique about this situation is none of these trees belong in the desert, especially the cedar tree. This is a majestic tree. Comparing ourselves to trees, don't you sometimes wonder how you ended up in the wilderness with all your intelligence, your money, your degrees, your jobs, and all your splendor? Don't you look around sometime and say, how did I get here? Well, let me say this. Like God, like the cedar, sometimes God plants you there. Contrary to what you may believe, though, a desert or wilderness experience is not a punishment, because God has ensured your survival in the wilderness. Look at this. Rivers, fountains, pools of water, all in the desert for your survival. Even in the wilderness, God is putting a river to provide for you. Don't you know rivers flow from higher to lower? God is providing for you from a heavenly elevation to your earthly elevation. A fountain. Fountains don't belong in the desert, and yet God puts a fountain with circulating water on a daily basis. Even in the wilderness, God is a God that never goes dry and promises to care for you continually. Pools. Pools relax you, calm you, and keep you calm. He leads you beside the still waters and restores your soul. I simply just want to suggest that God is keeping you even in your wilderness experience. Why? Because you're needed there. Look at the olive tree that's here. Don't you know that olive trees are a resource? The funny thing about olive trees is that olives grow in groves. But here God's taken the olive tree not only out of its element, but from away from the crowd. Don't you know that there are times in order for you to bloom and become your best self, God has to remove you from the crowd. God moves you where God needs you and will make you abundant in a place of barrenness. It bears a source of nourishment. God is calling us in this season, Santita, I believe, with everything going on, to bear good fruit in a difficult time like this and help use that fruit to be a blessing to everyone else. Because mostly it was used, the oil of the olive was used to anoint. When you bloom, God's anointing is apparent. You don't bloom in your own power. You bloom for God's glory. I remember my little niece Nyla one day in her kindergarten class. She brought home a little cup with dirt in it, and there were seeds in there. And when she brought it home, we were all intrigued because we didn't know what kind of plant it was. And she worked so hard on her little seed. She would move it around and give it water and do all these great things. And then one day, guess what? A string bean popped out. We didn't know it was a string bean plant. I say this to say that we never know what's blooming. Don't ever get discouraged by what you can't see. One day something beautiful is going to pop out. And I'm reminded also of when I came here to this church. You know, blooming sometimes has nothing to do with the work you did, but sometimes the seeds that other people have sown. When I came here and moved into the parsonage, I noticed these really lush plants in front of my door. And I asked two of the sisters if they knew what those plants were. And they said, Pastor, those are irises. And so I kept my eye on the irises. I looked it up on Google to see what they looked like. And don't you know, about a week later, boom, irises everywhere. I was telling everybody about my irises. I was calling folks and saying, oh, you got to come and see my beautiful irises, yellow, purple, at the front porch, at the back door. I was blooming. I was calling folks and sending pics. Here's the thing, Santita. I didn't do a thing to ensure those blooms. I didn't plant. I didn't sow. I didn't water. But I was reaping the benefits of the planting that someone did before me. I'm grateful for people like your dad. We're reaping the benefits of the seeds your dad has planted before us. Sometimes your bloom is a result of someone else sowed into you, your mother's prayers, your father's sacrifice, a divine connection. You didn't do a thing, and somehow you're blooming all around. And so I just want to say this today. When you bloom, God gets the glory. So go ahead and bloom. Bloom wherever God plants you, whether that's a 99-cent cup or a beautiful garden. When you bloom, people will see, know, consider, and understand that the hand of God is upon you. Bloom where you're planted. Do what you can with what you have, with the time you have, in the place you are. Isn't that good news?
Oh, ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? Good news, good news. That's a song we used to sing in church and in my high school choir. Ain't that good news? We got a crown up in that kingdom. Ain't that good news? Thank you for that. Bloom where you're planted, wherever you are. Do it, because you're supposed to be right where you are. Oh boy, and I'm so
Right
glad
where you are.
I'm glad you are right here with us every Friday. What a blessing. What a blessing. I see you, sis. Get that book, everybody. I see you, sis. I see you, sis. Pastor Tisha Williams. Huh. Wasn't that good news? Dr. Deborah Furholden, world-renowned epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health of the School of Public Health at Michigan State University. How you doing?
I'm doing great now.
Well, you know what? I tell you
I'm
what.
doing great. He does it every single time. Every single time. What a great word. It's funny because I used to I still do. I call my daughter my desert flower. This is my oldest who's about to have a baby. And she finally understood what that meant. And I said, do you know what it takes to grow a flower in the desert? How much water and tending to and shading you, because the desert gets full sun all day, every day. That's what it felt like trying to raise a woman of integrity and a woman who knew her worth in the crazy, crazy city of Baltimore, which I love, but it's a trip. There's a lot happening. And so I always call her my desert flower. And the boys would come around and I would let them know that this is my desert flower. And I've not done all this tending and watering and all this for somebody to come along and sully my flower.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Baltimore, Mobile, Detroit, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Madison, Milwaukee, LA, Mozambique, wherever we are desert flowers because we have a culture that does not support life and that does not support goodness. And we are going to have to be the change that we know needs to happen. And I feel like, the world is catching up with you. Now, a lot of people are talking about equity. The CDC has now issued a report that's saying that poverty is a key driver in vaccine inequities, not inequality, inequities. And we now have the progressives in the U.S. House of Representatives who are pushing for the $15 an hour minimum wage. They said poverty literally is killing us. And now we're still watching the vaccine rollout. And we're watching AstraZeneca be pulled from 20 countries in Europe. And we're hearing more things about, now more people have had the vaccines, Dr. Deborah Holden, and we're hearing more about the effects. Talk to us about that.
Well, this equity thing, you got to understand that I really, really got it. I really, really got it yesterday. I did a talk for the National Medical Association, and I was on this panel with the former governor of Louisiana and a chief policy advisor for President Biden, who's also a part of this task force, this COVID equity task force. People use the word equity a lot, and oftentimes people collect equity with equality, and equality is not equity. They're not the same thing. Things can be equal but not fair, right? And people say, I don't understand what that means. And I realize a lot of people really don't know what equity means. So I always try to think of examples of ways to describe things that'll make sense for people. So I say, imagine if you had a 5-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son, and it's dinner time. Would you give them the same amount of food? You wouldn't. In an equality model, you give a 5-year-old the same amount that you're giving a 5-year-old girl, the same amount you're giving a 16-year-old boy. Somebody's either overeating or undereating, right? The needs are different. So equity is about fairness. It's about people having what they need. And what I don't think is it's so hard for people to wrap their heads around is even when we talk about this wealth gap, okay, my dollar doesn't spend or stretch the same way that a lot of my white counter peers' dollar does. So I went to Johns Hopkins. You always say I got my PhD at 24, worked really, really hard, had to become Dr. Deborah Holden to live in the house that I live in. I had to save my money. I had to come up with that down payment on my own. I wasn't born like in the swamp, right? But if you think of it like a stadium, I was like born across the street from the stadium. I could hear it. I could see it. I could hear the people inside chanting and cheering. I knew there was something good going on. So I made my way across the street. I found out what it was. I worked really hard. I earned enough money to buy a ticket to get in the stadium. I was all the way in the back. I couldn't really see the game. I didn't have that good bird's eye view. So I kept working harder and I got me a better ticket and I got to the front. And then I decided I wanted to play. And then I had to practice and train and all that. For me to get where I got, I had to do everything. There wasn't a dollar saved for my college because every dollar that came in my house was needed to sustain that house. Mm-hmm. It was needed for all of that to go. Now, I bought this beautiful 5,700 square foot home in Baltimore. And it felt like I was working so hard. Because when you buy a 5,700 square foot home, what you don't realize is the utility bill is a trip.
Yes. And the taxes.
So there were summers when I had $800 gas and electric bills because that's how much it cost to cool that place. The woman who lived next door to me worked at the hair cuttery as a hair cutter. Mm-hmm. She cut hair at the hair cuttery. She inherited that house from her grandmother.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Her grandmother gave her that house. So what took me getting a PhD and working really hard to get, and then to maintain, all she had to do was be born and then work at the hair cuttery. See, that's the impact that's what privilege is. That's privilege. Privilege is being born on third base, but benefiting as if you had hit a triple.
30.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? We're going to, on the other side of the break, we're going to be talking with attorney C.K. Hoffler about another kind of equity, about voting equity. But I want to get a couple of minutes in with you about the vaccines. We're seeing still so much
15.
debate about vaccines because, in fact, many healthcare workers
10.
are still refusing the vaccine. But we're also now,
5.
with the rollout, seeing more people who are feeling the effects of the vaccines. Good, sometimes not so good. So let's talk with Dr. Deborah Holden about it on the Santita Jackson Show, talking about what happened in Atlanta with the Asian American community. The vice president and the president will be there today. I want to hear your thoughts on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a few minutes. Dr. Deborah Holden, Pastor Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
Pastor Williams, is she still there?
I'm still here. I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, honey. Just thank you for your word today. Really.
You're very welcome.
Thank
My
you
pleasure.
for that.
Hi,
Thank you
Dr.
for that. Thank you for that. Really.
No,
I was,
thank
you know,
so much.
because we really have to do that. We do have to blossom, as they say.
Yeah.
So where we planted. This is what God gave you this.
That's right.
This is it.
That's right.
And thank you for that. And I got a lot of people who
so
said amen. They loved what you had to say because that's what people need. Because oftentimes, we spend our lives, Pastor Williams and Dr. Holden, wishing that we were someplace else. We were with somebody else. And if I had done this, and I would be over. No, that wasn't for you. Right?
Right. That's right. I found that when you bloom where you're planted, God will make sure to replant you for sure.
Ooh, okay.
You'll be replanted eventually. If you do your best work where you are right now, the elevation's gonna come. Yeah.
If you're faithful,
I think that
you're talking to me, by the way.
faithful.
Like, this is God. God is like, Deborah, I have something for you. This word was for me today. You have no idea.
No, that's what the preaching is for. That's what the word is for. That's why the song says, oh my goodness, stop by the church sometime. Yeah. Something might be said that might help you on your way. Yeah. You got to stop by the church sometime, which is why we bring this here. But you touch us in a particular way, Pastor Williams.
To God be the glory.
Oh, for all the things he's done. How can I give thanks for all the things you've done for me? Things I don't deserve, yet you gave. To prove your love for me, the voice of a million angels cannot express my gratitude for all that I am and ever hope to be. I give it all to thee. That's one of my favorite songs to sing. You're going to make me sing it one day, but not this morning. That having been said, I think it's, is it Taché? I want to, because you say a lot of great things. Phonetically write out how I can pronounce your name. Is it Taché or I don't know. But you brought up something that was very interesting on this chat line. And everybody, please like and share, please. And thumbs up, like and share. And please also go over to my YouTube page, The Santita Jackson Show, and my channel, rather. And please like and subscribe. You said that blacks don't have advocates in Washington. Actually, we do. Your advocates, your lobbyists are your civil rights organizations. You need to join them. You need to fund them so that they can advocate for you, and you need to get involved. Most of us don't realize that the Dr. Martin Luther King was your advocate. He was your lobbyist. When he was going to see LBJ, he was going to lobby for you. That's what Reverend has done. That's what Reverend Sharpton. That's what Derek Johnson, the head of the NAACP, this is what they do.
I cannot get a hold of Attorney Hoffler.
Keep trying, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just need you to keep pushing. But stay right there. And Dr. Deborah Holden?
Yeah, can I just say something real quick? How much time you got left?
We got like 10 seconds.
Back in 30.
Quick. Okay, 30, 20. Give it to me, quick.
lawmakers are making laws to suppress our vote. Lawmakers are not making laws to ensure equity.
Of course not.
We need to be a demand that they make laws for us.
Yeah.
That's their job. Legislators make laws. They're making laws to suppress our vote.
Well,
but not making laws to ensure we're treated.
All right, here we go.
That's right. That's right.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. You can meet us over on Facebook on these various pages and Instagram and LinkedIn, everybody. I'm at Santita J on Twitter, at the Santita J Show, but at Santita J on Twitter, and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I'm also streaming on Reverend Jackson's page and on my landing page, the Santita Jackson page. If you want to friend me on Facebook, please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page, because I can't take any more on the Santita Jackson landing page. Can't do it. But we're talking on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. My family up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're talking about a lot. Today we're going to be talking about what's happened in Atlanta. That's weighed on my heart when I found out about it. I had gone on kind of audio mute on news mute while I was away for a couple of days. And I'm glad I did that. But when I came back to this painful, this tragedy in Atlanta, I said, we've got to talk about this, because there are a lot of issues at play there. But what's also at play is really COVID-19. We're still in the midst of this pandemic. What I just heard someone on Tom Hartman's show say, it's a contagion. I mean, this is where we are, Dr. Deborah Verholden. And now, as you've been pushing equity, and as we talked with Egan Kemp from Public Citizen yesterday, he said now is the time for us to talk about, health equity overall. We need Medicare for all. If you get COVID-19, it costs to treat it, everybody. But you do need access to vaccines and therapeutics. Equal access, you do. And we don't. And the CDC has shown that a key driver in vaccine inequities is poverty. Poverty, wow. So let's talk with you, Dr. Deborah Verholden, about just really, you sent me something last night. Well, before we get to that, just very quickly, what about this CDC report that says that poverty is a key driver in vaccine inequities? It was a report published on Wednesday, and it compared county level estimates of the first dose vaccination. And they saw that, the poorer communities had less access. What's going on?
Like me, it's news, right? This is what all of my life's work has been about. It's been about leveling the playing field. We focus a lot, and we do a really good job at what I call blaming the disparate. We are quick to point to individual level determinants of health. We always talk about how black people eat too much salt and sugar. That's why we got so much diabetes and hypertension. But we don't talk about the food that's available in the community, nor do we talk about how much food costs. And the fact that a lot of these foods that are filled with salt and sugar, which is a very American thing, are also the cheapest and most affordable foods to buy. Mm-hmm. They're not the ones that nourish you, that are life sustaining, that, help your body rebuild and repair and restore itself, but they're cheap and they taste good, and it's what's all around you. So this notion of social determinants of health, and Daniel Dawes says it another way. He calls them the political determinants of health. And I actually just ordered his new book, which is called The Political Determinants of Health. He's the brother that wrote 150 Years of Obamacare. And he was instrumental in getting Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, into place. But this is stuff that we've known, but we don't operate on that knowledge. If we know that where you live is a stronger predictor of how long you can expect to live and the quality of life you can expect to live, why don't we make better investments into neighborhoods and communities? And I'm not saying throw everything in the kitchen sink at a problem isn't the answer, right? We do need resources, but I've seen people go too far and they don't build anything that's based on good science or good evidence. It's goodwill, and they'll throw a ton of money at a problem, money that can't be sustained or money that when it dries up, the community is no better off than when it started. And so the fact that some of these leading agencies are now catching up is a good thing. And the brother from last night's panel, he said something. We had our prep call, and I said, look, I know you work for President Biden. I've got an open letter out to President Biden, which you'll be happy to hear. I have 2 legislators who are now going to champion it. I can't say anything, but I have 2 legislators who are now going to champion it. And all this work and movement to suppress our vote has done nothing but give me a stronger platform to stand on. Because I literally have been able to say, you will sit by and watch a legislator legislate attempting to suppress our vote, and you won't push for legislation to make our access to this vaccine equitable. So all of these things that are happening, but the brother last night, he said it perfect. He said equity is a new muscle for our government. He said it's a new muscle. And this administration, it's like a weak muscle, but we just keep working it and working it and working it and working it. And Mayor Landrieu said equity should be our North Star. So I really loved it because in the prep work for this call, I said, look, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to talk about. Because I don't want anybody to be broadsided. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm grandstanding. Mm-hmm. I was the last one to go. They went before me. If they wanted to pick up on any pieces of it, I'm like, God is going to bless me and anoint my voice. So whatever there is for me to say, I will say it. And it was so great because both of them really set a stage for me where I could then say, so now, right, given that we understand all these things, given that we understand a lot of what we see specifically around health, a lot of it is actually no fault of the individuals. A lot of it is outside of somebody's individual, control or decision making. See, as long as we're blaming the individual, well, it's the food you eat, it's the fact that you don't exercise, it's this. When we start to look and say, dang, zip code is a stronger predictor of health than diet, like that flies in the face of all that's been kind of pushed down our throats about health and some of these other things. So the CDC and some of these bigger leading agencies joining that fight, they lead authoring things that are elevating that for the public, I think is really, really important. So while people like me are like, well, duh, right? Mm-hmm. It does feel like a real victory to see the movement that's afoot and to see some responsibility starting to emerge for the fact that where people live, even though it should not, where people live is a very strong predictor of how they live and how long they live.
Well, for everything.
And most people don't have a choice where they're born. Well, you don't have a choice where you're born and what context you're born into. If you had a choice, you're a little spirit about the end of the world and you got enough insight on how things work, would you choose to be born in poverty? Like, who would choose that?
Well, actually, I was. When I was born when my parents were in college. They didn't have a home. They were actually a family, a couple. The Halseys were very kind to them and let them stay. And the first standalone home that my parents and I had, because I'm the eldest, was at a housing project in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so I get it. And my Jesse, Johnny, and I have health issues that my brother Yusuf and Jackie do not have. They grew up in a house. We grew up in apartments. And we grew up when our parents did not have. And so, so actually I get it. Now, do I remember all of that? Do I really care? No, because I had my mom and dad and that's all I needed. Right. And then my great grandmamas were coming, great grandmama was coming, all of that. And that's very, very important. But let me move to this because poverty is something that we're going to have to continue to talk about. And in fact, we expanded the vaccine equity conversation yesterday with public citizen Egan Kemp to health equity, because we need Medicare for all, period. People need equal access to equal high quality education. And if you don't believe it, look at this contagion that we're in. The prince and the pauper get COVID. Prince Charles had it. The homeless people have it. The healthcare workers have it. Everybody's got it. It's in the air. What about these vaccines? Because you sent that to me and I was intrigued by what you sent to me. about really every time we talk to people, every time you hear that someone's been vaccinated, you always ask them, well, how are you doing? Because that's the real thing for us, Dr. Deborah Verholden. We want to know how people are doing. How are you doing? And when you see AstraZeneca polls from 20 countries in Europe, you're like, hmm. And when you see on Facebook people who have Bell's palsy, right? And when you see high profile people die shortly after they've had the vaccine, and then you have other people who are like, look, my arm hurt for a couple of days, or I had a really bad, felt like I had the flu for a couple of days, and now I'm fine. I mean, you're hearing a lot of different things. What can we expect when we get the vaccine? Like, what's the range?
Well, I honestly think a lot of people are attributing things to the vaccine. I literally did a session earlier this week, and a woman said that she got her vaccine and she's gained like 10 pounds over the last month. Mm-hmm. The vaccine has nothing to do with your weight gain. Like, it is, like I had a friend who got the vaccine, and 4 days later he had COVID. And, he was so upset. Yeah, but it's just like everything that people are attributing to the vaccine is not attributable to the vaccine.
But wait a minute, let me ask you this. Not. Have we tested out the vaccine so that we know that to be true? I mean, have the vaccines been tested out? We have had way more people.
We have had way more people receive the COVID vaccine, like that have actually gotten the vaccine, than have received almost every medication that would have ever gone through a clinical trial, like that's currently on the market. So people want to understand these clinical trials. I know for a lot of people it went a lot faster than we're used to seeing it going, and we've broken that down, and there are multiple reasons for that. But all of the things that people are reporting are not attributable to the vaccine.
Okay.
They're just not. And there's also a lot of positive benefits. They're finding that one dose, as an example, one dose for people who have previously had COVID infection appears to provide a much higher level of protection than one dose in somebody who's never been exposed, right? The same way that first dose of vaccine seems to prime the immune system, and then the second dose really gives you that full response. It looks like for people who've had previous COVID infection, that first dose is giving them, almost acting the way the second dose does for a lot of other people. But we got to stay on our toes. This is a new virus, a new vaccine, and a whole new way of us living our lives. So we're learning a lot in real time. But people attributing all of these things, it's like when El Nino happened. You remember El Nino?
Yeah.
Everybody blamed everything terrible that happened in their life on El Nino. I literally was a joke between me and my husband. El Nino made my hair fall out. I'm like, sir, that is male pattern baldness. That is not El Nino.
But also
that was coming regardless.
But I think that one of the things we've got to do is for the things when people do have Bell's palsy. It seems to me that with this vaccine, we're saying if anything bad happens to you, it's not the vaccine. And I'm saying, can we at least put
forth...
I
wouldn't necessarily say that.
No, because people who try to report vaccine injuries or who try to talk about it, this is one of the few places where people can talk about it. Because you get shut down.
Sure.
You get deplatformed. You get a sticker on you on Facebook, on Instagram, on every place because you're spreading misinformation. I'm like, this is the first medicine in the history of medicine that has never had a negative impact on anyone. Please, my asthma inhaler says don't use it this way. I was told, wait a minute, do you take a leave? Oh, then, you take this. Then I got to give you another medicine because, when you take ibuprofen, you can't mix them. So I'm like, wait a minute, let me just let me ask the question because sometimes this stuff has a bad kickback on somebody. So my question is, because I think that we've got to be honest about that. Male pattern baldness, honey, your hair fell out because it was going to fall out. But maybe the vaccine might have prompted it. I don't know. Because it seems in some cases from what I've seen, I'm just a layperson, does it not serve as accelerant for something? So this is the speculation that's out here, Dr. Verholden. I'm just trying to bring this to you because people are also observing their husbands, their wives, their children, their loved ones. They're observing them, and they're like, I'm seeing a little something here.
Santita, I live in Flint, Michigan. Do you know this is the water I swim in?
Oh, yes.
I live in Flint, Michigan. The entire city was poisoned beginning in April of 2014. This is literally the water that I swim in. And so it's a fine line, because here's the two things I will say. So in Flint, I'm advocating for, we need, because the settlement's about to reach a close in Flint. We have until March 29th to either sign up or opt out. And if you opt out, you're never getting compensated. I mean, it's just going to take forever. Whatever. That's another story for another day. Maybe a great conversation to have with CK. But my point is that settlement for people really does have the sense that it's bringing it all to a close. There's no money in there for the ongoing research. The little bit of program dollars that they have, they're dedicating to something very, very specific, focused on children, and that money will absolutely dry up in a couple years. And people are left with a question, because we've had a couple of
Attorney Hoffler's on the line.
Since
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people who did have things like their hair fell out. My own daughters lost plugs of hair. When the oldest left Flint, it grew back, and the youngest who stayed in Flint, she still deals with that problem now. So there's all these things, and my thing is, for us to validly answer those questions, we have to keep looking. We have to keep looking. But what I don't want is for everybody to get caught up in a hysteria, nor put their head in the sand and pretend like no way, not possible.
And I'm just saying, we've been airing on no way, not possible, because people don't want you. Let's be very frank. People are getting censored. You have people who are world-renowned microbiologists and immunologists and virologists who cannot get heard. They're being called anti-vaxxers. And I just think that it's not helping when you have all of this. You have healthcare workers who are saying now 1 in 6, according to this Washington Post article, said, I will leave my job before I'm forced to take this. If you have the discussion, not you, but I mean, if we're able to have the discussion where we put our issues on the table, and when those who've actually been injured can talk about it, then I think we can move the ball along, because everybody wants this to end. This is awful. I'm so tired of these masks.
Yeah.
I can't see straight. Girl, I wore a mask the other day. I came off looking like Baby Jane. Lipstick smeared. Now, I was mad. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. I mean, I was, and I was furious, y'all. I was. I said, I hate looking like this, because I had to go, because I
Did you
went.
have red lipstick all across your face?
Come on, yes, not for long. I went and washed my face and put my lipstick back on. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And went out and bought another mask that wouldn't buckle, because I left my other mask. I said, oh, it was like, what? No. We're all tired of this already. But what I'm also tired of is the fact that we are not able to have this full discussion, and the misinformation, and listening to, because there's a whole body of thought behind people who don't wear the mask. I don't agree with it, but there was a young woman who dropped some food off to me at my place, and she had pulled her mask down to walk into my building, and I said, oh honey, you got to put it up. I stepped back from her. We were more than 6 feet apart. She said, but when you keep the mask up, it's carbon monoxide that you're breathing in. And so I said, okay. A lot of people doing a lot of research. They might be coming up, they might not be coming up with the right answers, but they're doing a lot, because we've not been told a lot of, we've been told a lot, the needle continues to move. And that's, that's a lot. That's a lot for us. But let me bring up Attorney C.K. Hoffley, your very dear friend, and because I want you all both to weigh in on this, because we're going to be talking about what happened in Atlanta, Dr. Deborah Verholden, because this is you talk about a public health crisis, violence, poverty, public health crisis, Dr. Deborah Verholden, racism, public health crisis. And when we watch 8 people killed, 6 of whom are Asian American, we saw this 75-year-old woman in San Francisco. I'm so proud of Grandma. This guy tried to beat her up, and she took him all the way down. But my mother's 77. What? What is going on here? And now there's some conflict about a hate crime, whether this was a hate crime. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, this is really, we'll talk about the vote next week. What happened in Atlanta?
Well, first of all, good morning, Santita. Good morning, Dr. Deborah Verholden. So now we have two of my favorite people who every day spread news, wonderful news, and who set the record straight. So good morning. It's great to be here. I just have to breathe. I have to exhale when I think about what's happening in Atlanta all around. If we focus on the hate crimes, the reason why I'm exhaling is, how in the world can any law enforcement officer, when confronted with these facts, question whether this is a hate crime?
No, CK.
It is only
he was having a bad day. That's why he killed everybody.
But see, that's why I'm saying, how in the world? How in the world? It is only when there are crimes against Black and brown people, minorities, do people question, well, I'm not certain if it was really as severe of a crime. It was just someone having a bad day. That is so offensive, and I think legally reprehensible. Legally reprehensible. Now, it's my understanding that officer is no longer the spokesperson, but the bottom line is that's how he and many people feel.
But CK,
when confronted with a crisis.
He was a proponent for these, Dr. Deborah Verholden, for these racist shirts. Calling it, basically saying that these viruses came from China. I mean, how did he get to be the spokesperson? I mean, I'm like, did you all vet him? Did you know who this guy was?
Because the president of the United States called it the China virus. I mean, let's be honest. He would say on national TV and on social media all the time, he called it the China virus. I mean, so all of that racism was fueled. And I think CK is right on the money. The problem is there's basically no other demographic that you could put into some of these sentences. There's no other demographic that you could put into some of these scenarios that wouldn't have people up in arms. When we saw early in this COVID pandemic and we said African Americans are 3 times more likely to become infected and twice as likely to die, take African American out and put white in. Whites are 3 times more likely to become infected and twice as likely to die. They stormed the Capitol because they lost the election. They'd have been burning the whole world down. We have a tolerance and an acceptance of these atrocities against people of color that just would not be, it doesn't even have the same vibration if you were to describe that as something that happened against white people or white women or white men. It's just we have an acceptance of these things, and it doesn't make good sense to me. It doesn't. But if you put it in a context called, we have a hierarchy on the value of human life in this country. That's how our system was designed. These fractions of people have now supposedly become whole people, but that is not how we're treated. And that is not that's not the core value, I believe, that's truly underneath of it all. And we see it play out in things like this. That's what we've got to do. We need a real reckoning with the history of our past and the impact and what that means right now and how that shows up right now. See, you can't have any reckoning. There can be no reconciliation without the truth. And we need to start to tell the truth about who we are and where we came from and what that means right now.
Well, I mean, and let's, let us be very, very honest about where all of this is coming from, right? This did not start with President Trump, everybody. It did not. And, we also have to be able to separate out the issues. I mean, I would like to know how, where the virus does come from, and it should not be racialized, everybody. It should not be racialized. No.
Right.
We need to stop that. But we need to know that we weaponize a whole lot of things because that's the game of power. So let's get real about that too. Let's get real about where we are. But the World Health Organization, when they want to go into China to find out about the origins of this virus, they ought to be let in. China should not lock them out as they have done. That shouldn't be racialized, everybody. No. Unless you want to go back to why China pushed the West out of China in the first place.
1 minute.
Because Britain walked in and tried to turn them all into drug addicts. Mic drop on that. You want to do that too? We can do that. Because we've mistreated each other all over the place. So let's just stop. Take a deep breath. Let's get this thing right. You don't walk into a place of business and kill people because you're having a bad day. And then you don't put the police officer before the world and make him the spokesperson. And now he says he's heartbroken about what he said. Really? What about the T-shirts you were pushing? What about that? That insulted a whole race of people. Really? No. No. You got a heart broken? Your heart is broken? Well, some people are dead.
10.
So that meant that you accepted this man's thinking. 21-year-old man. That, oh my goodness, I had a bad day. And Dylan Roof had a bad day, and he got a Burger King, a Whopper, from the police. Are you kidding me? I'll go more to the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. I am sick of them. This is just crazy.
Sick. And, the craziness is that there are many people here in Georgia who are like, yeah, that's right. He had a bad day. We shouldn't penalize him for that. I mean, things happen. What? He had a bad day. What about those 8 people who died? They had a bad day. Their families are having a bad day. That's a real bad day. They're having a bad life. How about a bad day?
And you know what? Hold on.
I had a judge.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Paul, leave those 2 lines open because we're going to have someone call in, right?
Yeah, are they both calling in?
No, one you're going to call Grace Pye. You need to call her.
Okay.
Call her now.
And then you sent me a new rundown.
Comes on at 7:30. But
gotcha. Okay.
Get Grace Pye up and leave the 2 lines open so that we can have Sung Yeon. I need to get her name, and as soon as she gets up, please bring her up so that I can get her name. Tell her I need to get a pronunciation for her name.
You got it.
Thank you.
Please.
Okay. Thank you. All right, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do a lot of things at once.
But well, Santita, it reminds me. I had a judge, a federal judge, in a case over a decade ago in a noose case. So in a workplace at a Fortune 500 company, that had like an assembly line operation, the managers, one of the managers was very annoyed with the black employees, and he was, would constantly yell at them and use racially insensitive language, and had a noose. And he said, look, if you all, or he said, look at here, or something like that, if you all don't do what I'm saying, and he threw a noose at them. Okay, so this resulted in litigation. A federal judge in Texas said, well, that was just one bad apple, and that was string. He didn't mean anything by it.
Okay.
When a white manager throws a noose at black employees and threatens them if they don't do what he tells them to do, that is not someone who has some string. First of all, why would he have string? That is not someone who's just one bad apple, because the company kept him on and did not discipline him. That is a culture where a company...
All right, we have Grace Pye.
Okay.
And happen.
Hold on 1 second, everybody. We have Grace Pye on. Grace Pye?
Hi, good morning.
Hi. You have some allies on with you today. But of course, I want you to tell your story. And Grace Pye is from the Asian Americans for Advancing Justice in Chicago. She's a colleague of my dear friend Andy Kang, who was one of the first guests on my show. So, not that I don't love you, Grace, but Andy's my guy. But it's good to be with you.
I totally understand.
No. But you're my sister. So and you've got 2 more sisters here with you. You have got attorney C.K. Hoffler. She's the president of the National Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest black bar association in the world. It's more than 66,000 lawyers. She wanted to be with you this morning and expressed her support.
Good morning. And I do want to express my support. And our bar associations have met with every major Asian American bar association to stand in solidarity, just so that you know that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
There's a lot of work to do. And she's also the chair of Rainbow Push. And of course, we've got Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. In fact, she's creating that school. She comes out of Johns Hopkins. And they're going to be listening to you.
We have Sung Yeon Chimero.
Okay. Okay, now let me speak with, is it Sun Young Chamorro? I want to pronounce your name correct.
It's Choi Mara.
Choi Maro. That's what I thought. It was like a CHOI. Okay. Thank you. That's why every email I sent you, I said, please give me a phonetic because I want to make sure that I get this right.
I'm so sorry.
No, because my name is Santita, and I have people who ask me if they call me Santina. And I'm like, no, that's not what my name is. It's actually
That's not my name.
That's not my name. That's not what my mama gave to me.
Oh my God.
Yes, trust
right.
and believe. Yes. My name was rent money. My parents had no money when I was born, and they were living with an older couple in Greensboro. And Mrs. Halsey said, well, if you live with us, could we? If it's a girl, could I name her? And my mother said, sure. So there we go. That's how I got my name. Seriously.
Oh my goodness.
Look,
wow.
hey, my parents, they let me come, and they made it. So I'm not mad. So if you would give me a verbal on your name, just so that I can hear it.
Yeah, it's Sung Yan Choi Moro.
Choi Moro. Sun Young Choi Moro.
Perfect. Yes.
I just needed to hear it, and it's phonetic, so there it is. Okay, so there we go.
Yeah.
It's good to have you all here. And
thank you for having us.
Oh, no. And I wanted to bring these ladies in because I want you to know that there's support out here for you. And
thank you.
I was explaining when Reverend ran for president in 1983, part of what was fueling him was anti-Asian violence. The killing of Vincent Chin and others. And that was something that we ran on, actually, because you had this sharp uptick in race hate crimes, during the Reagan years. I mean, the Reagan years, we forget, with all the smiles and giggles, it was a brutal time for people of color.
Yeah.
And poor people. And poor white people. Oh.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you all are here. And Dr. Frozen, you still there? Doctor D? Is Dr.
Oh, I was doing my best work on mute. Doing my best work on mute.
Goodness gracious. Just about to knock me out.
I needed to make some coffee. I didn't want to get in trouble, and you'd be like, who's making that noise in the background? Who's doing that?
No, that's the truth. That's right. Y'all act like this is Bush League.
30.
Let me see. And Tashay, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. We do actually have lobbyists in Washington. And I know when Rainbow Push had a bigger office, these are the people, what they did was they went on the Hill
15.
and lobbied for you. You got to get active in your civil rights organizations and help them to lobby for you, because that's what they do. That is what they do. They are paid to do that.
5.
So you support them. Your contributions enable and fuel that support. So stand by.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Friday, March 19th, 2021. To all of my sorors of Impervious 54. That's right. March of 1983, we all crossed over into Delta Land at Howard University, sending you all much love this morning. Hey. I can't believe it was that long ago. Love you all so much. All right, I'm Santita Jackson, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text to that number. Please do that. And please continue to call us at that number and let us talk about what happened in Atlanta. Let's talk about this wave of anti-Asian violence that is happening. Specifically, let us deal with that today. And we've got a wonderful panel and 2 leaders from the Asian American community, our brothers and sisters who are really they need to be allied. And believe it or not, we've had a lot of alliances built with the Asian American community. Black people have down through the years. We have. This is not new. This is not a new alliance. But we need to deal with this right now. We need to deal with, a police officer who it turns out has a history of anti-Asian posts, but yet he was the voice of Cherokee County. How does that happen? How is it that this same man said that, this 21-year-old walked in and killed 8 people because he was having a bad day? How does that work, everybody? Call me. I want to talk with you about that, because that is not working for me. Let's just put it that way. It's not working for me. So let's talk about that. 773 WCPT, 773-763-9278. Let's get a couple of these headlines out the way so that we can get on to our topic at hand. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 42 degrees. It will be sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 53 degrees. Sunny. The Dow closed down 153 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 409 points yesterday. The S&P 500 closed down 58 points. And happy birthday, Carmelita. Yeah, I saw you in the timeline. Sending you much love. Everybody give Carmelita Rivera some love today, everybody. All right, President Biden is reaching out to the Asian American community. He and Vice President Harris will be in Atlanta today after the killings, hoping to spread some healing. After the White House has spent 2 days working the phones, they will be in Washington trying to convey, according to Cedric Richmond, this White House senior advisor, what we're conveying is that we want to be part of the solution. You've all been in the community running these programs. We want your expertise. We want your input into how to get past this. They're speaking to leaders in the Asian American community. Now, how will hate crimes laws how will they be tested? That is a headline in the Washington Post. We're going to be asking our panel about that shortly. Was this a hate crime? There is some debate about that. So what about this emotional hearing about these attacks? GOP Congressman Chip Roy from Texas got things started by talking about the right of Republicans to criticize China and making a comment that seemed to celebrate lynching. He said there's an old saying in Texas about find all the rope in Texas and get a tall oak tree. Wow, it sparked an emotional and immediate outcry, including a tearful response from Congresswoman Grace Meng from New York. Wow. She said, your president, your party, and your colleagues can talk about issues with any other countries that you want, but you don't have to do it by putting a bullseye on the back of Asian Americans across the country, on our grandparents, on our kids. More than 4 in 10 healthcare workers have not been vaccinated, according to a Washington Post Kaiser Family Foundation poll. While 2 in 10 healthcare workers said they had scheduled a shot or were planning to, 3 in 10 said they were unsure about getting vaccinated or they were not planning to do so. And as many as 1 in 6 said that if employers required them to get vaccinated, they would leave their jobs. Advocates are applauding a house-to-house passage of bills paving the way to citizenship for dreamers and farm workers. And the Democrats introduced a bill to let Puerto Ricans determine their own political future and to be decolonized. Good for them. In the meantime, let's get to what happened in Atlanta, everybody. What happened in Atlanta? And what are the historical ties? We do know that women of color, black women, brown women, Asian women, all women of color are hypersexualized. I think of the song Some Girls by the Rolling Stones that came out more than 40 years ago. Some girls like to do this, Puerto Rican girls like to do that, hypersexualization, and black girls like to F all night. Yep, that was something that Reverend Jackson fought because it was so insulting to us. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about what happened in Atlanta and if this is a hate crime and what it is that we can do about it. And why is this happening all over the country right now in the United States? In the meantime, 172 Republicans are rebuked for voting against protecting women from violence. There are a lot of issues that intersect in these killings in Atlanta. And so we need to talk about that today. And we're so honored to have this tremendous two of the most prominent leaders from the Asian American community, our brothers and our sisters. We send you all of this love today. We want to welcome Grace Pye. Grace Pye from Asian Americans for Advancing Justice in Chicago. Of course, we've had Andy Kang on with us before, and I'm sending him much love. And thank you, Grace, for joining us. And Sun Young Choi Moro. Did I get it right? I want to make sure I do.
That's correct.
Come on, girl. I got to get it right. National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. I'm so glad that you're with us. And of course, you're joined by Attorney C.K. Hoffler, National Bar Association President and Chair of Rainbow Push, and Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. But the floor belongs to you, Ms. Pye and Ms. Troy Morrow. Starting with you, Grace, what happened in Atlanta? What is this?
Well, we saw just a really horrific murder of 8 people across Atlanta, 6 of whom were Asian American women. And, I think it was just a completely targeted attack, by this person on 3 Asian-owned businesses. It's clear to me, just from the fact that he targeted Asian-owned businesses and that so many of the victims were Asian American women, that this was both a racially motivated attack, but also that there's a gender lens to it. And that he specifically targeted, as you said, women of color, but in this case, Asian women, at their place of employment, at their place of work, and the fact that they had to work, probably a low wage job during a pandemic, I think speaks to the vulnerability of many of the victims. And it's just, just such a heartbreaking tragedy. Honestly, I think many of us in the Asian American community can relate. I talked to my family last night and we talked about, my mom and I always go to an Asian-owned massage parlor whenever I'm home. I'm visiting Los Angeles. My grandmother goes to a 24-hour Korean spa every week. And so I think it just really hit close to home for a lot of us because we know these businesses, we know these community members. And so it's just been really, really heartbreaking.
What about the pushback on calling this a hate crime?
I mean, that is just appalling to me, honestly, that the first thing that the police do is to start justifying the shooter's motives. You know what I mean? I mean, how can you walk away from this incident just looking at the facts of what happened and conclude that this was not a racially motivated attack? I think that is just hugely problematic. And I think it's clear to most people who are looking at what happened that there was both this racial and gender element. So I think it's just really important for all of us in the community to keep uplifting that.
Sun Young, Choi Morrow, talk to me. What are your impressions? I mean, you said not only is there pushback against calling this a hate crime, you have really the lead police voice. It turns out he was problematic. But first start with what it is that we saw. What are we looking at when we look at what happened in Atlanta?
Yeah. When the story first broke, I, like very many Asian American women across the country, had very similar reactions, right? We were devastated, but none of us were surprised. I mean, the number of women I have talked to in the last 3 days who have said, this is not surprising. It was really our worst fear come true. Not only because of the spike in violence against Asian Americans during this pandemic time, but as an Asian American women, we have shared the experiences of being racially, sexually harassed, for years, right? And so I think that what the conversation we're having today and, across the country the last few days, what's been surprising to me is how surprised people are about what Asian American women have been experiencing and how uniform that experience has been. And I think it's really important that we, I also don't want to underplay the sexual violence that happened here, right? Just because the law enforcement are saying it's not racially motivated, it was a sexual deviant act. Well, it was both, right? And there are many of us coming out saying, like, let's not lose both of the stories, because that's how we humanize the victims. And let's not forget that they were not just Asian Americans, they were not just women, they were Asian American women, and that's why they were targeted. And of course, to your point about the comments that were made, it's like when I have a bad day, I go for a run. I bake cookies with my kids. I don't go murder 8 people, right? Like, so the way they've handled it obviously is not right. And I think that also, is partially why, at NAPOF, we have been very, very strongly adamant that increasing law enforcement is not the solution to protecting our community. They asked me, do you feel safer now that, the mayor has increased, law enforcement in Chinatown and other places where Asian Americans live? And I said, no, that's a Band-Aid solution. All it does is increase the, criminalization and incarceration of Black and brown bodies, it doesn't make me as an Asian American feel any safer.
Well, help me with this. We're talking with Sun Young Choi Morrow, Executive Director of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, and Grace Pye, Asian Americans for Advancing Justice, the Chicago chapter. And of course, we've got Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. And I'm going to bring in Attorney C.K. Hoffler, National Bar Association President and a hot second and Chair of Rainbow Push. But let me just, Sun Young and Grace, help me with I'm having a bad day, so I come in and I kill you. And then you find out that the man who said, I mean, because that to me implies, and I infer from it, that he felt some kind of sympathy for this young man. And there's a direct line between that and what happened with Dylan Roof, who walked into a church and killed everybody he could see in Charleston, South Carolina. And when they found him, number one, they found him and he lived. But then they took him to Burger King because he was hungry. I mean, how did you read that? My heart just broke and I was infuriated. He said he was having a bad day. Grace Sun Young, help me with that.
I mean,
Yeah,
for me,
the same
I
reaction,
was.
right?
Oh, Grace.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Go ahead, Sun Young. No, that's all right.
Sun Young.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, like you said, you know, when it's a white male, which by the way, all of these mass shootings have been committed by very similarly profiled white males, right? Somehow they're not connected, right? They're individual, isolated incidences, and it's some way that society has failed this individual, and that's why this happened, right? And I am so sick and tired of that narrative, right? And this is why I don't think that law enforcement is really going to be the solution to the racism and the sexism that we experience in this country as people of color, because they don't see these murderers, killers as the danger, you know? And by humanizing him, they have dehumanized and re-traumatized our community and the victims that died that day.
Grace?
I absolutely agree. I couldn't agree more with Sun Young on that point, because, I mean, I think that, you know, it's just appalling. Like that hearing about that police response is what triggered my anger. You know, my partner kind of describes, he thinks I'm going through these different stages of grief, and yesterday was my anger day. You know, I started out with really deep sorrow. But I mean, when you see something like that happen, when you see, you know, these members of law enforcement defending this act, I mean, it just is absolutely absurd to me. You know, I don't know how anybody can look at that and think, oh, the solution is to invest in our police force, right? So I agree with Sang-Yeon in that Advancing Justice Chicago also does not support increased, you know, calls for added police or anything like that. And I think it's important just in the context of Chicago to remember that, you know, there were 3 police officers who raided an Asian spa here in Chicago in 2013 and physically and verbally abused the salon manager who was Asian American. She was an Asian American woman. One of those police officers is still on the force. I mean, they got such short suspensions that amounted to a slap on the wrist that were just unacceptable. And it's like when we don't even see consequences for officers, and the Black community has seen this time and time again, like how can we build trust? How can we, you know, think that this institution will increase our safety? I mean, I think that's, you know, history has shown that is absolutely not the case. And so we should be thinking about what other ways we can invest in safety and justice in our communities.
Well, what are the other ways? I mean, what is our takeaway now?
Yeah, well, let's think about like what makes someone feel safe. You know, when you think about the times in your life when you felt the most safe, right? Like having a good paying living wage job, right? Having the time and ability to take care of your family, to put food on the table, to have health care, right? Like all of those things are part of what contribute to safety in our communities. And so let's think about that, right? Are we ensuring that Asian American and immigrant communities and Asian American women in particular, right, like have access to these resources that they need to live lives where they can thrive. And, you know, there are countless barriers in the Asian American and immigrant communities, like language access. I mean, I think honestly, you know, some of the media coverage, I mean, there have been reports that a Korean language local, you know, newspaper in Atlanta was one of the only outlets to cover that they had an eyewitness who heard the shooter say, "I want to kill all Asians." Right. And the fact that's like, why are they the only ones reporting that? Probably because they had, you know, an in-language reporter on the ground who could communicate with people who spoke different languages on the scene. I mean, I just think that there are so many biases, right? And like just thinking about language access and access to, you know, resources and social service programs, like all of those ways are ways of increasing safety in our communities.
Sung Young, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I also wanted to add to that, you know, I think we, as the broader mainstream community, need to also pay attention to how we objectify and play into the stereotypes about Asian American women. You know, everything from the way some of us, you know, some people do makeup to make them, their eyes look more quote unquote Asian, or, you know, the kinds of costumes you see around Halloween that really exotify and hypersexualize, you know, our cultures. I think we need to be really cognizant of how we, you know, as just, you know, partakers of consumers of culture are playing a role in perpetuating this even in the slightest way. And I think it's really important. I'm so glad we're starting to have the conversation, but, you know, like you said at the top, you know, hypersexualization of bodies of women of color. I'm glad that we're talking about all of us, that, you know, in our shared horrific, you know, experience of misogyny in this country, and you know, and really looking for ways that we can uphold each other's stories and you know, kind of stand up for each other in this moment. And I think the other piece of it is, you know, we really want law enforcement, not just law enforcement, but lawmakers, you know, people around, elected officials around the country are coming out and, you know, expressing their devastation and their sympathy for the victims in our community. But what I want to hear is their acknowledgement of how our country has failed women of color. I want them to acknowledge that our history of misogyny and racism makes women of color vulnerable. And I think that's really important, because when we're able to admit that at a structural, at a governmental level, then we start, you know, with that in mind, and really centering the lives and experiences of women of color when we look for solutions to problems that we see in our society.
You know, Grace, I know you're going to only stay with us until the bottom of the hour. I wish you could stay longer, but, you know, as I'm listening to you, these are conversations that Black women have all the time. And then when I get, you know, into the broader human family, I hear Indigenous women have this conversation. I hear Latinx women have this conversation, because we're the sexiest women on earth, all of us. We have some magical powers, which is so insulting and crazy. And it's made us so vulnerable, Grace. And I think we do have to hold up each other's stories, because I think that's one of the takeaways here. That this man had, he says he's been in sex rehab. And so his solution was to go kill some Asian women. I mean, huh? Grace, you have 2 minutes.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Is it really unbelievable? I think that's what's so awful.
I mean, right. I mean, it's, you know, I think you know, sometimes my like emotional response is to make light of it, but that's because it's a traumatic thing to go through. You know what I mean? And so many of us as women of color come up with coping mechanisms just to get through the day. But I think that Dangyan is completely right to like, you know, our focus towards our system, right? This is a structural, systematic issue. There are things that we can do to prevent outcomes like these, and we need our leaders to take action, right? And so, you know, for us at Advancing Justice Chicago, that looks like advocating for a statewide a mandate to teach Asian American history in our public schools, because there is so much that ties our communities together, that are shared experiences, but our students are not learning them.
1 minute.
Like, how can we invest in this long-term ability to connect with each other, right? To really build bridges and to reduce discrimination and bigotry and all of that. And so that's one of the ways that we're looking toward the long term.
No, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And you know what? You have a home on this show, because we need to come together and tell each other stories so that we can know each other's stories. And we need to lift them up as if they are our own, because indeed they are. Grace Pie, Asian Americans for Advancing Justice Chicago. Give Andy and all my brothers and sisters at Asian Americans for Advancing Justice in Chicago my love. And of course, Rainbow Push will be holding a press conference today to talk about this. But Sun Young, Choi Morrow, you're not going anywhere. National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum Executive Director. Let's talk. And let's bring attorney C.K. Hoffler and Dr. Deborah Verholden and some of your other allies in
5.
so we can talk about this on the Santita Jackson Show. What happened in Atlanta to the Asian American community? It's all of our problem, everybody, and we all have a solution. Back with the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Grace, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you got to come back. But now I have your number, so I can bug
It
you
was
myself.
really fun. Oh, perfect.
I can bug you
Sounds
myself
lovely.
now. But I think, you know what?
And I appreciate it so much. Yeah.
Oh, no, please. That's what this show is for. But you know what we have to do? I think it would be very nice for us to have a conversation about this. I think, because if you look at just how it came to me, and my mother said, "Oh, this is old." All women of color have these magical sexual powers.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, this is so insulting,
Yeah.
and it just puts you on guard a lot, because on one level,
right.
you don't feel safe. And then, you got to come back so we can talk about what happens around these military bases in the Asian world. Because you see, oh please, you see that when you go there, you see that, you see it, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, and we can't leave that story out, right? In what's happening even now, and that I do want to bring, while Christine couldn't be at this interview, I want to bring her spirit and the work that they're doing, right? Women across DMZ, and really speaking to the fact that the way that Asian American women have been fetishized and exotified and sexualized in this country is directly tied to the militarism, United States militarism of our home countries. So we do really need to, underscore that as well.
Well, no, CK, Deborah, CK, does this not sound like an old Black story?
It does. But it underscores that there's so much more that binds us together than separates us. And I just wanted to, again, reiterate the solidarity that we have. And just for the record, from a legal standpoint, he is not going to get around this being a hate crime based on either federal law or Georgia law. Believe it or not, until last year, Georgia did not have a hate crime law. But it was the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. Before the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, there was no hate crime law in Georgia. But the killing of Ahmaud Arbery caused the legislature to pass a hate crime law in Georgia. And so this will be really the first major test of that law. So I say that because from a legal standpoint, I don't think from a federal, you look at the federal statutes or the state statute in Georgia, that he has a leg to stand on in terms of not having this deemed to be a hate crime, just based on the evidence that we know right now.
Well, when we come back, I want you to say that on the air. Because I think it's important for us to say that. And Sung Young, I wanted to bring on people so
back in 1 minute,
so that thank you so much, Paul, that you are not alone. You have a lot of people who
I really appreciate that.
You're not alone. You're not. You're not. We see you. We feel you, and we're with you. I mean, it's the same.
Absolutely.
It's the same struggle. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, people don't realize Rosa Parks was famous for investigating the rapes of black women, because black women were routinely raped by white men from
30.
slavery forward, past slavery, and white men were never prosecuted, ever.
We have Attorney Connolly, by the way.
Okay, thank you, and get
I'll call
Janet
Reverend Wilson.
Thank you so much. So that's what she was famous for in the state of Alabama. She was the secretary of the
10 seconds.
State secretary of the NAACP, and that's what she did. She did that.
5.
Every time she looked in her face, she saw the rapes of her ancestors, and it was just too much for her.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Oh, boy. Talking about what happened in Atlanta. And thank you, Grace Pye, Asian Americans for Advancing Justice Chicago. She had to leave, but she's going to be back. We're going to continue to have this discussion about the fetishization, if you will, of women of color. We all experience it. It's an awful thing. Women generally, but women of color, it is compounded. It is compounded. We're the sexiest, most exotic creatures you ever going to meet. We're just women, everybody. I ache like a woman. I take like a woman. Thank you, Bob Dylan, for that wonderful song. And I break up like a little girl. Sun Young Choi Morrow, Executive Director of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. I want to thank you for staying with us, but you're joined by your sisters, beloved Attorney C.K. Hoffler, from the chair of Rainbow Push and the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world, 66,000 lawyers. Dr. Deborah Verholden, who is the Associate Dean of Public Health, a brilliant epidemiologist, world-renowned epidemiologist from Michigan State University by way of Johns Hopkins. And of course, we've got Aaron Connolly, Attorney Aaron Connolly. Oh boy, Aaron, this is a whole lot to take today. It's a whole lot to take. One of our most brilliant political organizers, and of course, Reverend Jeanette Wilson from Rainbow Push will be joining us shortly. Let me start with you, CK. What we've been hearing, is this a hate crime?
Yes, absolutely. This is a hate crime. And I say that through the lens of both federal law and Georgia state law. So under federal law, just very quickly, I don't want to get too bogged down in legal terminology. A hate crime is a criminal offense involving actual or perceived, if it's based on actual perceived race, color, religion, or national origin. So these are offenses, criminal offenses involving offenses that are emanating from someone's perception of race, color, religion. The acts are criminal acts, so they're willful. And there's also a section of the federal hate crime law, 18 U.S.C. section 249, that involves gender. So these are hate crimes, criminal offenses based on gender. So when we look at what happened in Atlanta, that tragedy in Atlanta, through the lens, whether you look at it through the lens of gender or national origin or color or race or anything, those acts would qualify as a hate crime. So the evidence that we know thus far would support categorically and unequivocally in my assessment that this would be a hate crime under federal law. And again, that's 18 U.S.C. 249. If we look at Georgia, people need to know that up until the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, Georgia had no hate crime statute. But last year, Governor Kemp did sign hate crime statute into law as a direct result of the killing of Ahmaud Arbery and the protests and the pressure. And so now, just like with the federal statute, it would make it a hate crime if the crime is based on race, gender, color, religion, and the like. And in Georgia, we do have the death penalty. So the reason why I raise those issues as the inappropriateness of the comments made by that police officer, by that spokesperson, just is stinging and is so informs the racial animus that permeates certain parts of Georgia. It was just awful. But also it flies in the face of what Georgia law would interpret this as and what the federal law would interpret this as. So yes, from my assessment, my analysis, these are hate crimes, of course. The proof is going to be in the evidence. As I said, the proof is in the pudding. But the evidence as we know it thus far would point to, without a question, these were hate crimes.
Aaron Connolly, how do you respond to this, particularly the Cherokee County Sheriff, Captain Jay Baker, who said that, this young man who killed 8 people was having a bad day. Now he said he regrets any heartache for the bad day comment, and that They were construed as insensitive, but he insisted that, quote, they were not intended to disrespect any of the victims, the gravity of the tragedy, or express empathy or sympathy for the suspect. Yet he has a history of anti-Asian posts, according to news reports.
Exactly. And I think when I read that story and saw that statement, it was a heartless statement, no matter what kind of crime you're speaking of. But in this instance, I think it was particularly insulting. And then you see the background of this police officer who feels confident enough to be able to post these hateful messages. And the violence starts with those mustard seeds of hate, and they are planted and they grow and grow and grow. And then you see this police officer who is supposed to be comforting the community, the victims, their families, is coming out. And I'm glad that you spoke about Dylan Ruth and the analogous nature of both of these crimes. That if this was a person of color who committed this heinous act, they would probably not be alive today to stand trial. Yet this young man is alive and is given sympathy for having a bad day. Now, my first thought when I saw this headline and saw who this murderer was is, where does this happen, and what do white women who are raising these white men that commit these crimes, where is our responsibility? Where is the family responsibility? Where is the responsibility of many of these young men are radicalized in churches that breed hate and intolerance? So those are the foundations that I see. Also, we can't discard that this is something that has been happening in our country since its inception, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to the 1930s and 40s, where there was ridiculous and insulting propaganda against Asian Americans, including Japanese, who were interned in our own country and put in prison camps, concentration camps. So we have some accountability to do, and we have some serious cleanup. It's not enough to say stop Asian hate. This is about white supremacy and the fact that we are letting these boys get away with all of this.
Well, what about white women and their responsibility? Because this clearly was a misogynistic attack, but they're raising these boys who become men who do these things.
And I don't know what the answer is. I am a white woman raising a white boy. I am raising him differently, but I don't know what the solution is.
How are you raising him differently? Because
I believe that I take him to a church that believes in God and the works of Jesus Christ, where we make it a point in our life to live the works of Jesus Christ and not just the word, right? We have to put that in action. So that's lesson one. Lesson two for him is he since he was a baby, has been at community service events, protests. He knows how to hold a bullhorn and a sign. He does voter registration with me. He comes to, Santita, you've seen him at Rainbow Push all the time.
We voted together.
He is with me. Yes, he voted with your dad. Yeah. So he is out in the world. He is of the world, and we speak about harder things than maybe some would say is developmentally appropriate. But he is observing the world and asking questions, and his friends, his activities, his life sees all of humanity. And we talk about the differences. We talk about the fact that his friend, who is Black, will have different privileges than he will, and that it's his responsibility to be a leader and be we're doing one of the bystander trainings with Asian Americans Advancing Justice. So I want to bring him into that process and show him that we stand up for our friends if we see someone being attacked, that there is a humanity that is more important than any difference that we have. And that, I think, is the main point that I'm driving home. But there's thousands of examples that I'm trying to put into his life, so he has not only empathy, but can deal with the complexity of this life and not feel entitled to take and murder when he has a bad day.
When he has a bad day. Sun Young Choi Morrow, Executive Director, National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. Women have to take responsibility, Sun Young, for how we raise these children.
Yeah, we all do.
right?
Yeah.
Men, women, actually one of the most heartening things I've experienced over the last couple of days is actually teachers in my community who didn't know that, they didn't know I do this work, reaching out to me saying, oh my goodness, thank you so much for your voice, because I'm trying to put together some materials to teach my 5th graders, my 8th graders, my 10th graders about what happened. And we need to bring in, the voices and the perspective of Asian American women. So thank you. And, I cried the first email of that I saw, because I was like, wow, like there are teachers out there who are trying their best to make sure that the nuances of misogyny and racism is included in their education of the children. It's not, it's horrendous that we had another mass shooting, right? That I am so tired of the quote unquote, thoughts and prayers that we offer people every time something tragic like this happens, no matter what city, color of people's skin. It is awful. And I'm so appreciative that they're able to and willing to include the unique nature of what's happened and how it's so devastating for our community. And so there's that responsibility. And, our churches have a responsibility. I mean, I actually am a product of Wheaton College, just, down the street from us here a little bit. Yes. And I have to say that, so much of like mainstream and, regular, our day-to-day, especially evangelical culture, but Christian culture, at best we're silent. At worst, we objectify women. We teach sexist, misogynist theology, right? And so, and I think that's where, women as mothers, we need to pay attention that it's not just about, making sure they don't say those things and not turn out that way, but it's about talking about these instances and humanizing the victims, talking about why the way women of color are depicted in media is wrong every time you see it with your son, right? And so it's not just like, oh, let's do something, it's an event you do, it's a lifestyle, it's a worldview change that you have to do. And it's grueling, and it needs to be relentless, because misogyny is relentless, right? And so I appreciate the moms who are like, I want my son to be exposed to different things. I want them to grow up in a social justice setting, but it is really about the day-to-day. Like, what is your son reading and seeing and hearing from their friends? How are you knowing that they have the analysis and the courage and the wisdom to fight back and not be influenced by that, right? Because we can try. I mean, I have a 6-year-old myself, and I know as much as I try to protect her from all the Barbie nonsense and everything, like there's a way that stuff seeps into our lives, right? And so we have to be vigilant to say, okay, in my case, I talk about you play with Barbies, but we need to understand that women come in all shapes and sizes, and all of us are beautiful, right? Like, I have to continue to generate that alternative narrative, because if I just say, well, we don't play with Barbies because, I don't tell her because she's too little, but I tell her, like, we don't like the way they make women look, like, that's not enough, right? We have to constantly be engaging. And I think that's the hard work of mothers in this country.
Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Rainbow Push. How do you see this?
Well, I think that Dr. Howard Thurman, African-American theologian, said that the national span of racial prejudice and the virus of segregation that undermines the vitality of American life has to change. And the idea is that we live apart from each other. We live in these isolated enclaves. Chicago, most segregated city in America. You got Chinatown. You have Little Italy. You have the concentration of neighborhoods where African Americans live, the poorest neighborhoods, the least resources. You got Greektown. We do not share our cultures or share our ideology with each other, even our language patterns. And so we see, white America sees us not as humans. They see us in these stereotypical images that are now, that permeate the media. Asian women
are seen as some sort of sex goddess and sex symbols. African American women are seen as mammies, the Aunt Jemima thing. We're still looking at the slave ideology. Native Americans viewed in a particular way. All of the Latin Americans is viewed in a certain kind of image, negative images. They're drug dealers. We're drug dealers and drug users. And you look at the media images, the permeation of this continues throughout our society, and then in the churches. We don't worship together. We worship in segregated moments all over America as by one culture. So we never get to know each other. Dr. Curtis D. Young used to be head of the Community Renewal Society in Chicago, now heads the Minneapolis Interfaith Alliance. He wrote a book, edited a book called Becoming Like Creoles. We have to look at the church, how the church looked on the day of Pentecost. All the different cultures, voices were in the same room. They didn't see each other in these terms that Isabel Wilkerson calls caste-like systems. They saw themselves as created in the image of God. Even with the different languages, they worship the same God. I wonder, when she talked about evangelicals who are always silent on matters of race and matters of inequity, matters of injustice, they're so holy that they're like the Pharisees and the Sadducees that caused Jesus to be crucified. So I think it is the role of the church. We must become like Creoles. We must create an inclusive society that values every culture, values every gender equally. And we learn to, your father often talks about, we must learn to live together. We can't keep doing this. And this white supremacist ideology, it's a dying situation. There are more of us, people of color, than there are pure white Americans. That purity concept is over. There are more of us in the world. We must learn to enjoy and validate differences.
Well, and then the Europeans, I guess, have to make peace with the fact that they're Eurasians. Oh, maybe I dropped a little bit too much, Sun Young. But there we go. Dr.
Well,
Deborah,
they were born in Africa. They come from Africa. Everybody does.
But
Europe start with the African continent.
I hear you, but Europe is also
That's where the Garden of Eden is.
Europe is really a subcontinent of Asia. I mean, really,
yes.
That's if most people who are Russian are ethnically Chinese. That's just a fact. Dr. Deborah,
they must come to grips with their heritage.
Well, they have to come to grips with you don't treat people this way.
Dr. Verholden's not here.
I mean, this is.
Well, you first had to see me as a person, Santita. Remember, African Americans, Asian, we're never seen as people. We're seen as less than. We're products to be sold on Wall Street.
Well, let me give you this. This was something Reverend Jackson fought years ago. This was a hit album from the Rolling Stones. Some girls, French girls, they want Cartier. Italian girls want cars. American girls want everything in the world you can possibly imagine. English girls, they're so prissy, I can't stand them on the telephone. White girls, they're pretty funny. Sometimes they drive me mad. Black girls just want to get effed all night. And I just don't have that much jam. Chinese girls are so gentle. They're really such a tease. You never quite know what they're cooking inside those silky sleeves. Okay? Now, I remember Reverend Sun Young took a whole world of condemnation for going against that, and that was 40 years ago.
Absolutely. It's the same thought now.
It's the same thought, Sun Young. I mean, because these are the Rolling Stones, written by Keith Richards and Mick Jagger. So how do you react to, how do you react to that? I mean, this is
I'm listening to it. I'm listening to read it, and I'm like, oh, is that like top charts today? Because I just don't. It's the same stuff I hear now. It hasn't. And let's be honest. There is a lot of objectifying of women of color in the media even now, right? And so we don't even have to go back 40 years. We can keep receipts from 40 years, but really,
It's today.
You hear some of the music and
it's today.
Yeah.
But it's today. I mean, and right now, I'm concerned, CK, about the sympathy that. I mean, and people they might not say it, because you can say whatever you want to about this Captain Jay Baker of the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office. He has apologized for saying that he had a bad day. He hasn't apologized for this history of anti-Asian posts, but I'm sure he will. If the fire gets hot enough. But it speaks to a culture, C.K. Hoffler. Attorney Hoffler, it's a culture.
Absolutely, Santita. It does speak to a culture, and it speaks to a prevalent culture in Georgia. You see, because what he was speaking was the way he thinks and the way he conducts his business as a law enforcement officer. He was called on the carpet, so now he's apologizing. But that doesn't erase the fact that that's how he conducts business. That's how in Cherokee County, that is how they conduct business. They put him, their best person. You put your best person to be your spokesperson. You don't put the most raggedy, ill-informed. You put your best person who you know has presumably subject verb agreement, can get out there and speak. That's who they put on the forefront. He just got caught, but didn't. Ignorance is something that is deadly. It's just deadly. So he got caught, didn't even realize how offensive, terrible, and reprehensible his comments were. So I think that is a reflection of what many parts of Georgia, as we know, based on what we see the legislature passing, and based on this, if ever anyone needed more evidence of the mindset of many Georgians, not all Georgians, we did elect Senators Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, so not all Georgians, but many Georgians. That is proof positive in some counties of what we're facing.
But you know what? I tell you, the
Well,
Rolling
but it's
Stones.
not just Georgia, Santita.
Rolling Stones are not from Georgia, and this was a number one album
just Georgia.
in 1978. I only have about 3 minutes left in this segment, and I want to give the space to Sun Young Choi Morrow, Executive Director of the National Association, it's the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. And I want you to know, Sun Young, I want you to come back on the show to talk about this, but to talk about other issues, because as we are talking with each other, Sun Young, we all have this in common. And Aaron, as a white woman, we have this in common. We all have this in common. And we have to see each other, be each other, so that we can resolve this issue. I mean, my goodness, these women went to work that day. And they were murdered. And then you have a sympathetic police officer who says, well, he was having a bad day. And wait a minute, I have a lot of friends, some white male friends, who said to me, well, people are having a bad day. They've lost their jobs. Therefore, I said, therefore you mistreat me. Therefore you kill me. I said, how do you think? What's wrong with you? Sun Young, you've got the floor.
Bad day.
Yeah.
Bad day.
I have to say, I'm so appreciative of this space. I've been, I actually was in some ways politicized by folks that were involved in Rainbow Push, and that's how I came out of Wheaton as radical as I am. And I'm so glad to be on the show with you all, and to hear you say this, it means so much to me to say, to hear other women of color tell me that they see me and they see our community right now. I'm so sorry, I'm getting emotional, but
it's okay.
It really means so much to us. And, and you're right. Like, we need to stop normalizing, these unintended racism, and that's what I've been saying is like, well, just because he said it wasn't racially motivated, that's not how racism works in this country. Most white people wake up and go about their day, not thinking they're going to be a racist that day, but they are, because of the system and the structures we live in. And so I think it's so important for us to continue to highlight that, as someone said, like, they put their best guy out there, and he's only saying sorry because he's getting pushback. I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's like, oh, this is annoying. Like, I didn't do anything wrong, And so I just can't emphasize enough how white supremacy and misogyny is at work every single day, even in the wake of such a traumatic experience for so many of us. And I just cannot express enough how thankful I am for you all and your voice, and relating to what's happened with us as part of the experience here, in the intersection of race and sexual violence that's hurled at women of color in this country every single day.
1 minute.
Foy Morrow, Executive Director of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. Grace Pye, who left us. Asian Americans for Advancing Justice Chicago. Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Rainbow Push. Attorney Aaron Connolly, Rainbow Push and Covenant Strategies. And the chair of Rainbow Push, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Dr. Deborah Furholden, Pastor Tisha Williams. I didn't realize we had all women today. But we are all with you. We are one, Sun Young. We are.
30.
We are. And I want you to know your tears, we feel them, we've shed them. And we have a shared history. And we're going to come through this together. Red, yellow, black, brown, and white, as Reverend Jesse Jackson said. We are all precious in God's
15.
sight. C.K. Hoffler, that was the best that Cherokee County had to offer. Well, we
10.
got some work to do. We got some changes to make. Because
5.
some people died. And you know what? God is not happy. And we're going to make things right. I'm Santita Jackson. I'll see you on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson on Sunday. And Lord willing, back here on Monday. God bless you, everybody. Love you. Love you, Sun Young.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want you to know it's okay, all right? We're still on Facebook, but do you want to say anything to the audience? Because I feel your pain. It's a hard thing when you don't feel like anyone is hearing you. That's why I didn't want to crowd you out, but I wanted Aaron here. I wanted Reverend Wilson here, Attorney Aaron Connolly. I wanted Reverend Attorney Wilson, Reverend Jeanette Wilson Esquire. I wanted Attorney C.K. Hoffler. I wanted Dr. Deborah Verholzen. I wanted you to know that you have a universe of sisters out here of all colors, red, yellow, black, brown, and white.
Thank you.
We stand together. Okay. I don't want you to think that you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. Does anyone want to say anything? Because I think a word of comfort would be fitting before we get out of here, Reverend Wilson, for the Asian American community, and to Sun Young, because I heard, girl, you almost made me lose my lashes. I would have had to glue them back on. I said, oh my gosh, that means I would have to take my contact lenses out so I could see the eye, all these things. But seriously, I feel you, because and I think it's worse, Aaron and Jeanette and CK, when you feel like you're alone, when you feel like no one hears you. You know what I'm saying, Aaron?
And I think survivors of violence, people that are marginalized, people that have seen the white supremacy take over our systems of government, who have lost faith when they see these murderers feel entitled to go into movie theaters or massage parlors or gay nightclubs and murder whomever they don't want to see. And they feel entitled that they'll come out alive because the police and the government will support them automatically because these are white murderers. And I think anyone who has seen that injustice of our system is deeply connected to this issue. And I just want to offer my support and prayers for you, for the community, for my friends who I feel that are suffering, that I'm lending support to. And I think my hope is that this Sunday at our churches, we see some leadership from our faith communities to stand with our Asian brothers and sisters. That's my hope.
C.K. Hoffler, what say you? Is C.K. still there? She might have gone. Reverend Wilson, would you give us a word of comfort before we all go? Did Reverend Wilson leave too? Okay. Well, Sun Young. Yes. Oh, who's still
I'm
there?
still here. I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. What say you?
I just want to thank you all so much for hosting this in this space, and it's really it is really heartwarming the amount of outreach I've gotten from within our community and outside our community, and to when you just kept saying that we're not alone, I just really felt it so deep. So thank you, and I look forward to other opportunities to connect with you and folks in your community. And thank you so much for what you do.
Well, I tell you, we're all one community, and I think that sadly, events like this help us to see that and to talk it through. Um, and I guess I'm kind of old at this rainbow thing, and I really do believe in it. Even as we empower, and I think that all of our communities, we have a lot of internal work to do because people of color have been disempowered, right? So I think it's important for us to do that, and so I certainly believe in the internal healing that we all and strengthening that we all need to do. But I know at the same time we're one. I'm a Bible believer, and I know that we were separated, if you believe the Bible, as punishment. This was not.
Yeah.
This was, this was you all can't figure out how to get along. Okay, so I'll make you different races, give you different tongues, and now I'll give you something really to fight about. We're one. We're one. We're one family. Everybody. And we've had different experiences, and we've had similar experiences, and we've had the same experiences. And we need to see each other. Period. We need to start. We need to start seeing each other. And when you see each other, you can be each other. And then, when you see and be someone, you will not, there's some things that you won't let come out of your mouth, Sun Young. Okay? Because you're like, wait a minute. Sometimes we need to get on the other side of what we say about someone, what we say to someone, what we think about someone. Believe me, if you keep on living, you will be on the other side of that. Just keep on living. It will happen to you. So, it's the Asian American women today. It's Black women all day. Black Asian women all day. Because guess what? We're all hypersexualized. It's all crazy. And let's just be honest about that. The hot, spicy Latina. If I hear that one more time, I think I'm going to scream. The angry Black woman. But she's. I just read to you the lyrics. This was from 1978. I remember my father going up to Atlantic Records, which was their home record company at the time. I don't know if they're still there. And he said, this is an outrage. Black girls want to F all night? What?
Yeah.
Chinese girls are so gentle. They're really such a tease. What? Oh my gosh. No, 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 no. But the European girls, they want jewelry. They want fine things. Mm-mm. No, 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 no. That's all crazy. But it's particularly offensive to women of color. Particularly.
Yeah.
And we have to be straight up about that. It's particularly offensive because I'm tired of women of color being the whores always. And I wanted it. These women went to work. Even when you talk about prostitutes, these women are on the streets not because they want to be there. They need to, you probably denied them education. First of all, they have a willing audience. They have paying customers, okay?
Yeah, there is a market.
There's a
market,
market.
we see, right?
There's a market.
There is a market.
So stop.
Yeah.
These women leave their babies, they leave their homes, and they put their lives at risk to go to work. You can call them.
Thank you so much.
I'm sending you much love, and you will be back, but we'll be talking about this and other issues, okay? Because we have a lot to work together on, okay?
Appreciate it.
And you got a big hug from everybody here. Big hug. Okay.
Thank you. I'm really feeling it.
Oh, bless your heart. Bless your heart. And God bless you. And Erin, I'm sending you much love, my girl. And everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Much love.
Let us know what the action items are if there's anything that we can do to help. I'm sure you'll update us, Santita. Let us know.
I will, because this is not going to stop here. I think we got to have. I think I'm going to post these lyrics from some girls. How about that? I'm going to do that. This is the problem. Okay. I love you, everybody. I will see you on Sunday on Keep Hope Alive, and I will see you on Monday, God willing, here on the show. God bless you, everybody. Love you. Mwah. God bless. Like and share, everybody. Please go over to my YouTube page, The Santita Jackson Show. Like and subscribe. And please meet me on my Facebook page, Santita Jackson and Friends. Okay? All right. Love you, everybody. God bless.